Welcome to Rucks, Mauls and Oval Balls, and we are back for episode 28 of the fans' favourite rugby podcast, hosted as ever by the fans' favourite rugby podcast hosts. It's me, Dave, joined as always by Rory. Rory, say hello to the listener.
Good day. Hi listeners. Hi David, how are you?
Oh, I'm full of the joys of spring. I can't even lie to myself. I am on day 14 of a 14-day horrendous diet in preparation for my surgery tomorrow. It has sucked the soul out of me, and I have no energy. Just nothing. There's nothing going on. When you do 800 calories, no fat, no protein for 14 days straight, it's
not enough.
It's not enough to keep you going. So yeah, it's been a slog, but I'm under the knife tomorrow, Rory. So we're nearly there.
You're finally going to get that boob job you've been so desperate for.
It's oddly enough, that is the exact same joke the people at Man vs. Fat were making yesterday as well.
Good lads.
No, good lads. Yeah, it's something about the rugby crowd. Yeah, that's not the plan. I'm surprised you didn't go bum sorted. That was the other one you went for at the start of my my endeavour. But you know, at this stage, I'm not going to argue with you. This is the episode, Rory, where you can say whatever you want, and I'm just not really going to have much of a rebuttal.
Finally, Big Roar unleashed.
Big Roar unleashed. But yeah, doesn't bode well for the rest of this podcast. That I'm already tired of that. But we will do our best to try and entertain you all and do what we do best, and that's talk about rugby. But also, Rory, I need to ask, how are you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'd feel bad complaining. But I've had quite a good week. I went to Finsbury Park to watch the Stereophonics on Friday. Great fun, great night had by all. Mm-hmm. And that gave me a very good excuse to spend my Saturday sat indoors in the dark watching rugby because I was a bit hungover. So
perfect.
all told,
what a
fantastic.
Day. What a day to line up a hangover for.
Yeah, you got to line them up, haven't you?
Yeah, did you start at 4:30 in the morning and go all the way to 10 o'clock at night?
No, I drank 2 bottles of wine at the concert, so I
just
managed to
in time
get
for
on
Lions then.
I managed to get onto a game. Got the second half of the France game, and then caught back up on everything else throughout the day.
Fabulous.
But we'll
get into that. We'll get into that. I'm sure, Rory. But for the listener, this episode we're going to go Lions. We're going to talk England. We're going to talk Under-20 World Cup. And we'll just talk international rugby in general. And a bit of DPRFR. If Presidente has, come back from one of his many glamorous holidays he goes on, it is the summer season in the Democratic People's Republic of the Front Rowers. But that's how this podcast is going to run, Rory. Does that sound like something you want to be a participant in?
Almost like I put it together myself.
Almost like to put it together, and it would be incredibly rude for you to say no. Because that's what we're going to do. So, starting off, Lions. Always a tricky one to cover on a podcast because of how quickly a Lions tour moves. As we said last week, there's been 2 games since we last spoke Lions. There's been the game against the Reds that was last Wednesday, and then there's the game versus the Waratahs that took place this Saturday. Throw your mind back, Rory, to last Wednesday, if you can. Were there any talking points from that game in particular that are still worth discussing with our listeners today?
Well, look, I mean, the thing about a Lions tour is because it does come so thick and fast at the start, the talking points sort of get a bit muddled from game to game, and you're just sort of left with quite broad themes. Mm. And there are some themes that have come up across all of these games, really. I thought it was an example. The Reds game saw some pretty good attacking cohesion. I mean, they scored a lot of tries, another 50-pointer. But another tricky first half. Would that be fair to say? I mean, fair play to the Reds. They were immensely physical. They really challenged the Lions, particularly early on. Obviously took the lead and regained the lead, in fact, as well, didn't they? Yeah. And they they really challenged what the Lions were doing. Paisami in particular, I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah, he was good.
Really put a lot of pressure on that. And a couple of Prem alumni, Tamaga Allen scored a try, looked generally pretty strong on the set piece. Salakai Lotto, I believe, played for Saints, didn't he?
Ex-Northampton.
Yeah. Had a very good game. I thought Uru in the back row, I think was on a return from injury, but I thought he was very impressive. But yeah, the Reds really put it up the Lions in the first half in particular, and then that sort of quality shone through, particularly when some of the substitutes came on. Another week where a change at prop really helped. Will Stewart struggling more. Will Stewart and Porter struggling probably more than. Yeah, I mean, for my money, I thought certainly from a scrummaging perspective, I thought that's got a potential to be a starting test team if you wanted to target that area. And actually, they really struggled a bit in the scrums, I thought. Will Stewart, if we're honest, fluffing his lines generally, giving away scrum penalties. Hunter Paisami broke through a tackle between Porter and Stewart, and a really weak bit of tackling by both of them. So, I mean, from an audition perspective, not a great day for those two. But there were some very, very good performances. Maro Itoje in particular, we sort of, before that game, the podcast recorded before that game, one of the things we talked about was really wanting Maro to
have that leadership, that leader's performance.
Silence a few doubters, and he definitely did. He was excellent, I thought. Finn Russell, I am increasingly impressed on this tour how physical his tackling is. He's slotting people. He's showing he's not just a one side of the ball kind of player. But yeah, I mean, still some issues there. Line out not always on point, missing double top and
was Dan Sheehan was struggling, wasn't he?
Kelleher, I think, was it?
Or was it Kelleher? I just this is the problem with the thick and fast fixtures. I'm getting mixed up who's playing where, but I can't remember which game, but they showed a graphic of the accuracy of all the hookers, and Cowan Dickey, who's had not the best of darts, was top of the charts for accurate line-out throws. And I was like, that's interesting, because we've been saying that Sheehan's kind of shoe-in, and that's based on Kelleher's and Cowan Dickey's poor line-out throwing. So it's interesting. It is interesting.
Yeah, but sometimes it's not always sometimes with the line out, I mean, it's not the hooker, sometimes it's not the thrower, sometimes there's lots of different moving parts, and sometimes even if the throw reaches the person, it's not great because it's not double top. You lose the presentation, and I think in general it's just been quite a messy set piece. Scrum and line out really have been quite messy on that. So there's a lot of work to do on that side, but I mean, some really good moments. Jack Morgan, phenomenal.
Well deserved man of the match.
Yeah, 100%. Scored a very nice try, but also, which actually came off a big scrum. I think after Genge and Beelum come on. But it's been talked about a little bit in the wider media. The Lions seem to look much more threatening when they go front door physical and just put the power game on, and they do seem to be struggling to build that cohesion in attack that Andy Farrell's looking for. That was really evident in the Waratahs game, which I guess we should address as well.
Yeah,
but
I do think the Australian sides have they seem to have agreed a method of negating that attacking shape, where it's a pretty much 4-man rush defensive line, cutting out that kind of out the back pass that is the shape we're kind of built, and they're just cutting out at source. And I think we're struggling to find answers or ways around that, and having that plan B that we've spoken about all year, really, about how that's often the thing that teams struggle with. And maybe this is part of a touring party, and it's the problem with that is that you spend so much time getting plan A right that you don't really have time for a plan B and plan C to be worked on quite as much.
It definitely is, but what I would argue is the purpose of the shape they're playing there is that it gives you different options. And if the team you're playing is rushing through to cut out the out the back pass, what you do is you do a little shift pass and you go front door, and you give them something else to worry about, because the tip pass at the line if the defence is rushing up, they're much more likely to be disconnected at that point. And that gives you the option then to put someone through on a tip pass.
Yeah.
So actually, maybe it's less the structure, it's more the decision making, or the trust, the cohesion between players, and that's probably the bit where being a touring party.
Yeah, because I think in the Tars game specifically, I painfully say this, like Finn Smith did not have a good game. And that was because in those moments, he was more often not trying these little grubber kicks or little kicks that were just aimless. You see him in a Northampton shirt, he is doing those little tip-off passes. So I worry, as you say, I agree, that is a way to unlock it. But it doesn't seem that is what is the thought of the rest of the players around Finn Smith to give him those options, because his only option is to try a little grubber through, which just didn't work every time, or the quality of kicking wasn't good. But that's not usually his go-to option. So I worry that the options aren't there at the moment because they're just not singing off the same hymn sheet, which is to be expected.
No, and to be honest, he was also on a sticky wicket because actually, if they had changed up the plan in that game, their ball skills in contact was so poor.
Oh, the handling was awful. Yeah,
the handling was dreadful. But it was in contact that it was particularly dreadful. They were getting stripped. They were tipping it on when they got hit. You know, there's a lot of little knock-ons there, and that's worrying because that's not against Test match players, broadly speaking. And they're getting effectively out-muscled in the contact and given the opposition the ability to disrupt the ball. You know, it's players that should be better there. You know, Ty Burn, I think it's one of the poorest games I've seen him play for a really long time, and a lot of that was down to that. And actually, it wasn't until some of the more direct players came on, like Joe McCarthy, like Ellis Genge, that actually they got a bit more control there. But even there, I mean, very, very poor. And going back to Finn Smith, you know, it was just one of those days where nothing really didn't seem to be able to make the right decision. Because even when he was trying those grubber kicks, they were a bad call under pressure. You know, he shouldn't have been given the ball probably in the first place. But you know, being a fly half, that should. Yeah. And he was making bad decisions on it, and he was making bad decisions in other moments. When the Tars scored on about 35 minutes or so, I think it was when Lancaster scored. Yeah. He bites in on the edge and gives them the overlap and lets them go down. And, you know, it's just one of those days where people made bad decisions consistently. But I mean, we shouldn't be overly negative because obviously they still won the game. They did still win the game, and I think you're not playing well is big. Yeah, and that's a sign of a good touring team. Is that if you're still winning when you're not playing well, that's still good. And like we said in the Reds game and previous tour games, the set piece hasn't been impressive. I at least think in the Tars game, the set piece wasn't too bad, and kickoffs weren't too bad. The two things that have kind of been a bit of a worry for me. So it's almost like a flip reverse. They've sorted out the set piece, and then it's everything else that's become a bit of a problem. 100%, and I think, you know, we'll find out more in the Brumbies game, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But one of one of the things that hadn't been so much of a problem was ruck ball, and that was poor against. They got a lot of turnovers at ruck time. What it feels like is they're solving problems by creating other problems at the moment, and it's difficult to diagnose that because what you're aiming for is for players to change behaviour so they solve the original problem rather than change tactics so you cause problems elsewhere. And they lost a lot of turnover ball against the Tars, not just in contact but in the actual rucks as well. Yeah, their rucking was really quite poor, and you start to think, well, how do you solve for all these problems at once? And you really, the only way you can do it is to simplify your game plan completely. Yeah, and maybe this is where
the Tars 7 may have played himself onto a tour spot for the Australia team, though. To be fair, the way he was playing.
Honestly, I don't know how you don't select him as a Joe Schmidt at the moment because he was superb. But Gamble, wasn't it? Yeah, he was fantastic. Yeah, I mean, this is the difficulty. The difficulty with analysing, because we're trying to analyse two games at once, and they both sort of come away with different problems. But the core problems are the contact areas and the set pieces.
I'd also throw in slow starts.
Slow starts also a problem, but that's probably an emotional energy aspect which you would expect Andy Farrell to be able to work out reasonably well. That's a real strength of him as coaching. Conclusion I've made of those two games is that I still think if you put together all the good bits of what the Lions have done over these first few games, you do put together a really good test side.
Yeah.
But maybe the combinations haven't been right so far.
No.
Now we look ahead to the Brumbies game, the selection for that, we said last week, I said my sign-off last week was that I thought by this time next week we'd have 12 of 15 pretty much selected. And you look at that lineup for the Brumbies game, I reckon
it's got a test feel to it, doesn't it?
I think of that starting 15, I would say, 12 or 13 of those at this point have now got a test shirt.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely at least 10.
Yeah, certainly at least 10. I think you could argue both centres. You can probably still argue tight head.
Yeah.
And you can probably argue 6 and 7.
Yeah. But I do think that's the 9 and 10, and I do think those are the wings and fullbacks.
Yeah. Feels like, and I think the locks are sorted. I think Itoje and McCarthy have really put their hands up.
Yeah, although Cummings did have a good game against the Tars.
He did.
But probably not strong enough.
My gut feel is that Cummings' struggles in the first game he played probably were enough to put him out of test contention because...
And James Ryan certainly didn't put his hand up too much, did he?
No. And the biggest reason is, and I thought Cummings had a really, really good game, right? That intercept in particular was so impressive, getting back to intercept that
work
ball
rate.
And he was literally everywhere. And I really like Cummings as a player. I think he was Scotland's arguably their biggest miss.
Yes.
Apart from Tuipulotu in the Six Nations, because that tight five
grunt
is such an important aspect, and it is always where Scotland have often struggled. But we know that the Australians are going to come with a big aerial threat just by dint of having Suoli. Just him alone from kickoffs. And they're going to want to have at least Itoje, McCarthy, and possibly Chesham, by the looks of it, all there to contend with that, because they have been getting robbed at kickoff.
Yeah. And
Chesham, I think, you could argue Chesham's either played himself into that shirt or Burns played himself out of it with that performance at the weekend.
Yeah, I do feel like Chesham hasn't put a foot wrong, but I don't think he's had to be spectacular to kind of be now considered in that 6 shirt. When all the way up to this, I've been saying, Burns is the natural 6, but I do think he's kind of played himself out of contention a little bit.
It's just one of those, you have a game like that where it all goes wrong, and suddenly that's your chance potentially gone. Now that's, we're saying this before the Brumbies game, before the Anzac game at the weekend. So again, this could all change. We don't know. Yeah, Injuries happen, form changes.
There are still 3 games to go till the first test.
But that being said, that side against the Brumbies looks to me like the test side, and I would be surprised if tomorrow, today as you're listening to it, doesn't end up being the best performance of the tour so far.
I think we kind of need it to be. I think everyone looking at that team knows that is pretty close to test quality. I think if that's another underwhelming performance, I think there will start to be murmurs, perhaps, and saying, maybe this isn't as easy as a tour, or as big of a chance to get that tour victory as we'd all been kind of presuming. I guess the only little glimmer of hope for any of the naysayers out there is look at Australia's performance against Fiji, but perhaps we can talk about that later.
I mean, Australia will be a lot better than people maybe thought they were going to be. They've been really on the up. That was their first game back. I'm not reading too much into that at the moment.
Big injury, though. Big injury.
It is a big injury. I mean, that's going to be difficult for them to cope with. Lolasia was a massive part of what they were doing in the back line. But I would still back Australia, I think, to pull that together.
I still think they're going to be 3 very competitive, very close tests, I suspect. So it's definitely not kind of... it's not going to be an easy test series for Lions, and we've seen that from playing these domestic teams. Like these aren't rollovers. These Australians are not rollovers.
No, not in the slightest. Not in the slightest. And I was really impressed by the Tars, who I don't think had their best season.
No.
In Rugby Pacific, and I thought they really took it to the Lions at the ruck. Their line-out maul, obviously their one chalked off, which I thought was technically fair, but
another day would have been fine.
Yeah, and then they obviously scored another one. I think that kind of stuff in particular will worry Andy Farrell. If you're losing the game at ruck and maul, your set piece is a bit wobbly.
Yes,
your contact skills are wobbly.
Considering the back row options we have as well.
Yeah, that starts to make it look much more difficult to win any test match with those kind of problems. Now, that being said, again, some good performance. I thought Ben L probably had his best game on tour.
Yeah, he was great. He was really good.
Yeah, I thought he was very good. Obviously, Hugh Jones, very good couple of games.
Yeah,
3 tries in 2 games, I think it is.
Yeah, he's doing well. Alex Mitchell, he was good at the 9.
I think Alex Mitchell really put his hand up and said, "I can fill that gap left by Thomas Williams."
Yeah,
and step up for Gibson Park if I need to. I thought he was very good. It's tricky to analyse because you're still sort of second guessing selection. So you're sort of having to second guess what you think is going to happen in the next game. It's as much interesting to see who's playing themselves out of test match shirts as it is to who's playing them in. And I know that's a negative way to look at selection.
Yeah,
but it's always interesting the players that struggle on tour. You could argue Hugo Keenan, not his strongest day.
Not a good game.
Van der Merwe struggled all tour. Obviously, Ted Byrne we've covered. Finn Smith, first couple of appearances really good.
Yeah.
Then quite a poor one.
It's just a question of whether that's a wobble or will be continued. We'll see. Yeah. And then James Ryan.
James Ryan. I mean, there are people who will argue that James Ryan might have been lucky to have got on tour in the first place with his form in recent seasons.
Yeah.
I know he's had a bit of a resurgence. But you remember how big a deal he was when he came on the scene.
Oh, huge! He was the next big thing. He was Ireland's Maro Itoje.
Well, he was Paul O'Connell reincarnate, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Although there is Paul O'Connell's son coming through now, or nephew. I can't remember which one it is. So literally another O'Connell coming through. But also, on that topic, obviously we've written off Tag Furlong already in a previous episode because we've said he's really not in form. I was actually thinking he was looking pretty solid.
Yeah.
So
and as much as anything, Will Stewart fluffed his lines.
Yeah. So a week, as we said, a week is a long time on a Lions tour. A lot can happen.
Yeah.
And
they've got two games this week, and in fact, those are the last 2 games before the Test match. There isn't a game next Wednesday.
Right. 2 games to go.
So it's 2 games to basically lay down your marker. Which will make these 2 interesting as to how many players rise to that occasion, and how many say, "No, I'm putting my hand up for this, and I don't care what people are saying. I want that shirt."
And I do think we have a moral duty to not dress up any individual too much, because last week we bigged up Elliot Daly, and sadly, the day after we did that, Elliot Daly, he had his tour-ending injury. But that does beg the question, Rory. What role does Owen Farrell have on this tour?
Probably midweek captain, or midweek leader, whatever you want to call it. Driving standards outside of the test match side, probably. I absolutely love it as a selection. Partly because so many people don't love it, and I think that's brilliant. Because how many parts of the world, and I've seen this from a lot of commentators in New Zealand and South Africa, in particular, who have been like, "What is everyone's problem?" Then you just go through Owen Farrell's achievements as a player. Sometimes he's been nominated for World Player of the Year, World Cup final, World Cup semi-final, nailing touchline penalties against South Africa to nearly topple them in a World Cup semi-final, premierships, European Championships. No one else seems to get it, and I don't really get it. Why there's so much animosity towards him.
Well, I don't like the pick. It's nothing to do with him as an individual. I just think Lions Tour should be picked on a number of factors. I think one of the most important factors is you need to have been playing rugby relatively recently and not still be going through return to play protocols and not know if he's actually going to be fit to play at all on the tour.
Three-time tourist.
But
three-time tourist.
If it was that important, why not select him at the start?
Well, at the start, you could argue that at the start it was more important to have someone like Elliot Daly who covered the back three, particularly before Blair Kinghorn got on tour. I think now it's probably more important to say that they need that kind of leadership within the squad.
So
because that's
the argument I don't buy. I don't buy it. You're telling me there's not a lot of leadership in that squad already? Like, most of that back line is over 30 years old with over 50 caps each. I know people are like, oh, Owen Farrell's got 100. Like, really, is the jump from 50 to 100 that different? Yeah, he's been on a couple of extra tours. Like, is there value?
This is his fourth tour. That he understands.
They've got Johnny Sexton there. Like, how much experience do you need?
As much as you can get, I would argue.
So have him there at the start then as a kicking consultant. It just doesn't make sense for him to take and replace Elliot Daly. Just doesn't make sense to me. I think that's my issue with it, because I think there are players out there that there are needs. Like fullback, Hugo Keenan's clearly not ready for it. So our fullback options now are Kinghorn, who's played one game, and Marcus Smith, who we've already said in this podcast isn't a Test 15.
Hugh Jones can play fullback.
So you want to play players out of position rather than select someone up who can play fullback regularly and has done recently.
I want Owen Farrell in the squad. I'm sorry, I just do. I just want him there. I think what Owen Farrell... Listen to all of nearly every former tourist who's talked about this, who's toured with Owen Farrell, has been effusive in why they think this is a good call.
No, I get it. I get the argument to a point that, yes, he has lots of experience. Yes, he's a good tourist. He's a consummate professional. He's a world-class kicker, a world-class player.
Drives standards. Everyone talks about it. He drives standards. And maybe, we don't know, we're not in camp, maybe there was a feeling behind the scenes that standards weren't as high as they wanted.
But how does he drive standards if he can't even train because he can't return to play because of his concussion protocol?
Well, we don't know that yet, do we?
Well, that's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. That's one of the many reasons he wasn't selected in the first place. It's because he can't even play.
I find it hard to think that they wouldn't have thought that bit through. I find that difficult.
We'll see. But it's just, yeah. I think if I was Tom Jordan, I'd be a little bit gutted because I feel like he was the ready-made replacement for Elliot Daly.
So many players are gutted to not be on a Lions tour. You can't
give it to someone who's at 3 already. Then,
yeah, I mean, yeah, you can't pick players based on who might be gutted. You have to pick players based
on form, quality. You can't argue that Farrell's had a good season. You can't argue he's in form. You can't argue he's fit.
I'm not arguing any of those things. No, I'm arguing that they will have identified what they feel that squad needs, what qualities they think that squad needs, and they've gone, Owen Farrell fits that brief. And at this point in the tour, because you got to think, this is the point where the squad splits, right? Basically, after this week, the squad splits into test match players and midweek players, broadly speaking. And this is the point where this is almost the most dangerous moment for the cohesion of that squad, because suddenly you've got players who might think they're on a jolly, might throw their toys out the pram, might lose interest. You know, those kind of things can and have happened in the past. This is basically the precarious moment for a Lions tour, because everyone who's worked towards being a Lions test player suddenly now finds out whether that is or isn't going to happen, and there are going to be some big names who don't make it. And what they'll have probably identified is they wouldn't have brought Owen Farrell in for just anyone, but given that it's Elliot Daly who's gone, and they've assessed their options in the back three, the centre, the fly half, and then looked at the leadership group, they'll have gone, right, where we need to prioritise right now is that the mindset within the camp as a whole is potentially at its most fragile, potentially at its tipping point. And that's when you need a character like Owen who can come in and galvanise players, bring them together, drive their standards, push them on to greater heights. Even if it's just from being a presence, I think the bit that I do think the fact that this is where the squad splits will have been a massive factor in that, because it's how you manage that emotionally as a player, as a coach, as a group. At this moment, that's where the Lions tours are potentially won and lost.
Okay. Well, if that is the case, Rory, and you may well be right, I then worry about why has Andy Farrell not been able to instill that quality, those standards in that camp with the players at his disposal. Has Maro Itoje's captaincy not hit with the squad? Are there other leaders amongst the squad that just aren't doing their job? Do questions need to be asked? I don't know, because I get the argument that Owen Farrell is in there for his experience, his leadership, etc., etc. My counter to that is, why is that needed? And will those questions ever get asked? If we go and lose the Test Series 3-0, yes, those questions will be asked. But I just wonder...
But if they go and win the Test Series 3-0...
Picking Owen Farrell isn't the reason for that.
We don't know. We also won't go back over it, because all those decisions will have been factored into a 3-0 series win.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what we're talking about here is completely pointless and it serves no purpose.
Yeah, but you could say that about all rugby analysis.
Oh, yeah. That could literally be the tagline to this podcast. But...
look, you.
Well, a lot of the comments I've seen around like nepotism, like
mental. The idea that nepotism is insane.
Is it?
Yes, 100%.
George Fort's got 100 caps, and he's in form.
Yeah,
and he drives standards.
I don't. Arguably, but he's not been a Lions tourist. George Ford was in my squad originally. I'd have picked George Ford, but my argument here is on the balance of probabilities. I think Owen Farrell's a net positive to that squad. The accusation that it's nepotism, I think, is insane. I think the idea that Andy Farrell is that kind of character to have done that is ludicrous. I think you have to take Owen Farrell as the man and as the player and with his experiences, and how I actually don't really accept the argument that he's not the right pick.
Okay, that's fair. We can't talk about this for the entire podcast, Rory. I still don't buy it. I still don't think it's a good call up personally, purely on the basis that how can you expect him to be effective on the rugby pitch? And that's what I want from a Lions tourist. If they're going to be useful behind the scenes, bring them along anyway, but bring a player as well. That's my counter, because why couldn't you do that instead? And could have done that from the start. But let's move on. Let's move on to England versus Argentina, Rory. Now this...
I think we'll enjoy talking about this one a bit more.
Oh, yeah. Farrell. Oh, for sure. This one was pure joy to watch, Rory. It was not what I was expecting at all.
I loved watching this match. If anything, I loved that first half even more than I loved that second half.
Yes, the defence.
The grit of that defensive performance. I had people texting me at half time saying, how can England expect to win playing tactics like that? I was texting about going,
they're winning.
what game are you watching? A, they're winning.
Yeah.
And B, they just held out Argentina with 13 and 14 men for quite large periods of it. They've held out a team ranked higher than them in the world. One of the most dangerous attacks, as we saw for their 2 tries, which were phenomenal. We'll get onto those. That first half performance, the grit of that, the line speed, the physicality in the tackles.
Yeah.
I could not have been more impressed by that first half performance. And to top it off with a vintage George Ford drop goal versus Argentina.
That's big. I'd love to have seen the odds on that. I imagine they were pretty low, because it just seems to be pretty much a given.
His second attempt was rubbish. It was about as good as I know. But the first one, phenomenal. And I just thought, given the amount of possession that Argentina had, the amount of territory possession, field position, for England to keep getting up and making those hits, to keep just doing the right thing, to hold the ball up over the line at the right time, I thought that entire first half performance was emblematic of some of the best England performances you see ever. It's that kind of grit that actually makes you go from liking a team to loving a team.
Yeah.
And some of the hits that were coming in from players who were very few caps that were on debut. Seb Atkinson, I think, had the highest number of tackles in the team. I think he had 21 tackles in the test.
Performance from him, yeah.
And he was binned for 10 minutes and still made 21 tackles.
Yeah.
Ridiculous sin bin, by the way, on the halfway line, but on a marginal offside.
Yes.
I mean,
bonkers.
Yeah. But I'll get accused of being too much in Seb Atkinson's camp. But yeah, because they took some big hits as well. And Iskra, just Iskra absolutely smash Henry Slade early on.
Absolutely levelled him.
just timber.
Iskra was throwing himself around the entire game. Like he was a broken man by the end of it.
Yeah. Well, if you've got thighs that lovely, you need to use them in a rugby game.
Absolutely.
I thought that first half performance just showcased exactly the foundations of good England sides. You had Tom Willis carrying like Duan Vermeulen. Like,
yeah. Have you seen that stat of joint tackles and carries of England players? I think it was like 41 or something like that with him. And in an England shirt, that's the second most ever. And everyone else who's in that stat has played a full 80 minutes, and Tom Willis only played 60.
Just the engine on him. I mean, and it's not a really good turnover as well.
Yeah.
He's got so many aspects to his game. I thought it was great. I thought Ben Curry, really good. A couple of nice little nudges with the ball as well.
Yeah. He wasn't afraid to hoof it, was he?
No, really by that. Charlie Ewels, best performance I've seen in England shirt. Absolute nails when his finger went.
Yeah. Did you like how the Argentinian TV was so determined to get a picture of it, they just would not change camera angle for like 30 seconds, hoping to get a view of it?
Yeah. I mean, and he just looked absolute nails there, didn't he? Just chatting with the referee was like, the referee looked like the gip.
Yeah.
So good. Joe Hayes, great hands in the corner to put Roebuck in.
That try, that little shift.
Soft.
Ever since we pointed out him potentially not being made for test level tight head, we
just challenge players. We challenge players to greater heights.
He is looking better and better each time we watch him, that's a tough thing to say as a Northampton Saints fan.
Yeah,
but I was very, very impressed with his performance overall. Not just his hands, but like in the scrum, in the loose, in the tackling. He was doing some pretty ferocious hits as well.
As well, slotting people in defence. Couple of scrum penalties as well. Really, really good. I mean, not really a weak performance on the pitch. I thought Ben Spencer, great.
I guess the only weakness, and if it is we're being really harsh, would be discipline. But we managed it. I think the number of penalties we're conceding, I think a lot of them were questionable. I was not particularly impressed with Angus Gardner's performance in the first half, but my anger disappeared in the second half.
Yeah, I think it's my third note on here. I've got Angus Gardner is so irritating.
But to be fair to him, to prove that we are a biased and balanced podcast, gotta love his communication. He does talk through everything he does. So I think as a player, you would love that. But he talks too much. Come on now.
Is it him that does the shadow games of rugby to warm up before tournaments? Have you seen that?
I hadn't heard that. No.
I'm not sure if it's him or Nick Berry. It's one of the Aussie refs. They did a media piece with one of the channels, one of the Australian channels, I think it was, before he goes into like a test series or a tournament. One of his warm up he goes to an empty rugby pitch and does a shadow game where he talks the game through like he's talking to players and basically runs up and down like he's so weird.
Surely,
it's so weird.
Surely that's not real.
No, I've seen it. It's phenomenal, and I implore everyone to go and look at this. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life. He goes around like he's doing ghost rugby. It's great.
Wow. Okay. Well, the thing.
Well worth a watch. Yeah, I know. All in all, I mean, I've got nothing negative to say about the England performance. My only negative is why were they wearing a training kit?
Yeah, I wasn't a fan. Wasn't a fan of that.
Do you know what it looks like? It looks like the T-shirts you can get for a £5 about 3 weeks after the end of a World Cup.
Yeah, on TV.
I can do with a training T-shirt. I'll get that. It's fine.
Yeah, the ones that you wait till they're on sale because no one's buying them.
Yeah.
But is this the first iteration we're going to have of the new brand deal with Castor coming up with some pretty ridiculous kit designs? Seems wasn't for me. Wasn't for me that one.
Yeah, not good at all. No, I love this game. I mean, the way I summed it up here, the thought I had to sum it up, it was Argentina have got that amateur era ethos in attack. We can talk through their tries in a bit more detail, but it's like an amateur era attack versus a pro era defence, and it's just what comes out on top there. And England proved that defence wins games.
Yeah,
but just such an entertaining match. That second half when it opened up, England scoring some really, really good tries. The Murley try at the end was great, just seeing you going width to width and getting Murley one-on-one. Roebuck's try on 49, where Joe Hayes passes it, actually getting into that position. Seb Atkinson takes the ball to the line, pulls it back. George Ford cut out pass. They get round to the edge. Roebuck takes it in. They recycle, and then just a little pop pass to Roebuck back on the edge. Freddie Stewart's try, just a great cut. Just comes from a scrum penalty that Baxter wins, basically ensuring that Argentina have to sub both their props because they can just see what way the scrum's going. And then Ford just put in. You've got 3 options there to pass to. Just being George Ford picks the right one, perfect pass straight into the hole, basically under the sticks. Just no notes. No notes.
That's the thing. Like, the first half was such a textbook defensive performance, and I thought the second half was a really, really professional, astute attacking performance. Like, everything was covered.
So, question for you, David. Byron McGuigan's on this tour as defence coach. A defence coach. Lee Blackett's on the tour as an attack coach. Big tick for both of them on that performance alone.
I think I saw somewhere that Lee Blackett is already kind of been signed down to become the permanent attack coach off the back of that.
Well, Richard Wigglesworth's an attack coach with the Lions at the moment.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, well, here's the real question. Have England found a new coaching lineup? Somehow, they just put together a coaching lineup
on the back of that one performance.
One performance, yes. I'll take that. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. We'll see how it goes. But on the strength of that performance alone, do you think Steve Borthwick is suddenly thinking maybe this works better?
If those performances are replicated in the second test and versus USA, where we see the same intensity in defence and the same clinical style of attack, you really need to start thinking about, do we keep these guys around? Because it's not just a case of, it's just a slight difference to what we've seen already. It was notably better than we've seen England recently, certainly in defence. Like, that intensity in the defensive line was what we were crying out for at the start of the Six Nations. And the fact that they got game one.
Yeah, absolutely. And El Abd is still I'm not sure if he's on the tour, but he's still
part of the coaching team, isn't he? I
Yeah.
suppose the other counter to that is it's the fact that you've got a lot of players there who know this is their chance to put their names into the hat for when all the players are available.
But against a really good Argentina, I know it's not. I know they weren't full strength, but they weren't far off.
No, absolutely not. Like, this is a fully creditable big win. I'd say it's one of Borthwick's biggest wins, one of his best games.
I mean, how many performances have they had that are better than that?
Not too many, I'd say. So I think huge credit in the bank for Borthwick, huge credit in the bank for Lee Blackett, Byron McGuigan, and huge credit in the bank to all the players. I'm already looking forward to the second test to see if it carries on that way. And it's so positive. The only bad news that's come out this week, obviously, is that Henry Slade picked up an injury. Maybe in that Isco monster hit. Who knows when that injury took place? But
he came off on about 70 minutes because for a while I couldn't work out what the lineup was because
I think we volunteered to go down a player, didn't we? Because we just didn't have a sub, and it might have been him.
Yeah.
So who takes that 13 shirt, Rory?
Well, my pick would probably be a Jomo, but there's a very good argument for Oscar Beard.
I think Oscar Beard's more Slade's. He's a more like-for-like swap for Slade, isn't he?
Well, Slade was effectively defensive leader in this, right? He was leading the defence out wide. So you need someone who can replicate that. Now, what I would argue is a Jomo probably gives you the more cohesion in attack that Slade gives you. I think Jomo's got more similar skill set in that sense. Oscar Beard's probably more of your running threat. Of those two, who leads the defence better? I don't know, actually, is the honest answer. Probably Beard, but...
Maybe, but I think a Jomo's probably a bit more seasoned, because Beard's still, 22, 23? Yeah, to be fair. Yeah, it'll be an interesting one. Can Atkinson do it? He's defensively astute. I know he's had Chris Harris outside him.
Yeah, he's not 13 though.
No. But does your defensive leader have to be 13?
Well, I think the way that they were defending, in particular, it's still pressure from the outside, right? They're still trying to use to an extent that blitz defense, which requires high pressure from the outside. Yeah. So you need your outside backs to lead that.
Well, so the other option is Northmore. Is it Northmore who's on the tour?
It is, yeah. I think Northmore's seen more as a 12 these days.
Yeah, I'd see him more as a 12 as well.
Yeah, but he can play 13. I mean, he has played a lot of 13.
If only Dingwall was available.
A lot of squads.
If only Dingwall was available.
Yeah, that's the thing. Dingwall and Lawrence was your first choice centres, and Lade was your backup, and now none of them are available. This test is a real opportunity for some centres to put their hands up for selection in the autumn.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait for that game.
It's really nice when it's exciting watching England, isn't it?
I know, it doesn't happen often. Not often enough, anyway.
No.
And again, I just really hope this isn't another flash in the pan. Because we had this a couple of years ago when England went and did the tour to New Zealand and put two really good performances against New Zealand. And I was like, oh, this is the start of New England. And then it's like, back to Six Nations. Oh, okay, we're back to box kicking. I hope this is something that's not a flash in the pan and is actually a continuation of lots of good work that's been going on with this crop.
I'd hope so. I mean, I'd argue, I think they still kicked a fair bit in this game. They kicked so well, though.
I think that's the difference. When Ben Spencer, best game in an England shirt.
Yeah.
Obviously helped by having George Ford outside him, who was once again magnificent.
I mean, you could argue that the England team looks significantly better when you pick Ben Spencer and George Ford as your halfbacks.
It's a fair argument based off of that game. You can't disagree with that. If that carries on, strong case for that, isn't there?
I mean, they're both young enough to go to the next World Cup. But I mean, I say this is all getting ahead of things. But yeah, all round, just a superb performance. Freddie Stewart had his best game in English for a while as well.
Yeah.
First starting game, possibly even first time back in a squad since Dublin.
Yeah.
And I didn't think really put a foot wrong.
No, well, I can't. The thing is, I'm sure there are moments where a few players did put their foot wrong, but the game was so good and entertaining, and the performance was so good, I've forgotten them all. So, would you make any changes for the second test at all, other than Slade, and other than obviously bringing Fassabon and any other Gloucester player there into the team?
Yeah. Pick Charlie Atkins, drop George Ford, pick Fassabon. No, I wouldn't really. I would. You could maybe make the argument for Coles not having his best game. Obviously, he had the highest shot. Maybe that he wasn't his best game, but that would be nitpicky.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah, let's just roll the same dice and see if we get the same result. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think cohesion's key, right? And there's players I'd love to see play for England, but I don't want to fall in that trap that England fans always do of always wanting the next cab off the rank. And actually,
if we don't need to change it, we don't need to change it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can we just talk briefly about the Argentina tries, though?
Yes, I sense you've been wanting to talk about them.
I mean, both of them,
Yeah.
phenomenal. But the Rubiolo try in particular,
yeah, it's beautiful.
Just the handling that they're able to put together, just the mixture of passing, the use of forwards and backs interplay. Gonzalez just everywhere. Isgro's just such a threat on the outside. Cinti and Picardo just phenomenally well-balanced centres. Elizalde and Carreras is like these interchangeable 10-15. When they get that flow right in their attack, oh my God, the Pumas purr, don't they?
The Pumas purr, Rory. Oh, I like it. That's a good one.
It's an experience that gives me a very particular feeling watching the Argentinians when they play like that.
Yeah, Vettel, yes, absolutely.
Oof, I was in full Vettel, I'll tell you that. Yeah, I was really impressed by some of that, and actually, to be fair to Argentina, they came up against an England defence that was running at 110%, and they would be within their rights to say, we probably should have won that game based on that first half performance. We should have been ahead by 2 or 3 tries.
Oh, for sure.
And they probably should have been, and they'll be reflected on that at the moment. But yeah, those tries they scored. I mean, it was Rubiolo and Matera, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The Matera one, the crossfield from Carreras to Cordero was out on that wing.
Yeah, which shocked me when the commentator said still doesn't have a club for next year. My brain immediately went, Newcastle Red Bull Falcons. They do like an
Ben
Argentinian up there.
They do like an Argentinian up there. And Ben Stevenson's just left for Van, I think. So there's an opening on the wing. Give us the Red Bull.
Where's the money?
We want to see it. What I thought was that it was two really well matched sides, and on this occasion, England were just clinical enough with the ball and just physical enough in defence. And I think this Saturday has got the potential to be an absolute firework display.
Absolutely, because Argentina will come out firing because they know that they probably, off their first half performance, could have won that game because they should have had a lot more points on the board than they did. So I think the second test is set up perfectly. I'm excited. I still think England will pip it and it's purely based off that one performance we had. Because I think why
they
wouldn't
reach
we?
the same heights. Yeah, if they reach those heights, there's no reason why they can't win that
If
game.
they defend like that, they'll win. They all win.
If you defend like that, you'll win a lot more games than you lose.
Absolutely. Moving on. England still the topic, Rory, but our younger brethren, Archie McParland, we spoke to last week, talked about a big game against South Africa under-20. That took place on Friday last week. Kind of a must-win game. Sadly, it was a loss for England, despite the great build-up, despite all the expectations. I will say that was probably one of the most intense, exciting games of under-20 rugby I've watched for some time.
It had a lot going for it, didn't it?
It did. And a lot of it off the back of some rather spectacular South African players.
Yeah. What I thought watching it was actually based on the games that I have watched, and I haven't watched every team, but I've watched most of the top ones. This was the first time I'd watched the South African team, though. And based off the back of that, I thought for this current tournament, you could make an argument that was the final.
Yes, I agree.
I think those are arguably the two best teams in that tournament. And actually, based on all the other games I've watched, possibly by a bit of a distance. And the South African team was big.
Yeah,
they were big.
I think that's a good summary. They were big and they were fast.
Cheswell Just, the right winger,
rapid.
But I mean, possibly a cheat code. I mean, the line he hit in that first try.
Yeah,
it was like blinking, you miss him.
Yes,
because all of a sudden he got the ball and was like, "Oh, jeez, where is he gone?"
Yeah, the problem is they got a few of them. So I thought Cupido, the 13, was similarly cheat codey. Barney, 7, looks a bit like a cheat code in the sense of just too big to be a 7, but somehow makes it work.
And is it Hashim Peed, the 9?
Just a general cheat code.
Just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. And I looked at that and I thought, South African rugby is about to have some good times.
And then you bring in Moyo, the 10, slots penalty kicks from 60 metres out.
Yeah, just the casual 60 metre.
Just a casual 60 metre penalty.
This was, I mean, obviously disappointing for England.
Yeah.
To knock them out. And the fact that they got, I think they were 19-7 up at one point, were they? 19-14?
Yeah, they were leading at half-time. They were in the lead.
They will be very disappointed not to have closed that game out and probably suffered in the heat again in the second half. But that South African side was a lot of fun to watch.
That South African side was considerably better than probably the last 2 or 3 years of South African under-20 sides I'd watched by some distance.
Yeah. Just physical, direct, great skills. I mean, the players you've mentioned, they're all really good candidates. I thought, is it Wandile Malaba, the number 8, just looks like he's going to be an absolute unit.
Yeah.
Strong scrum, because it was a strong England scrum, and they matched.
Yeah, it was pretty even, I'd say.
Yeah, and the fact that it was even is a sign of how strong that South African scrum was, because that England scrum has pretty much decimated every team I've watched them play. Even the French teams have struggled against that England scrum, and it was properly physical upfront battle. But yeah, if that South Africa side doesn't go on to win the title, I would be amazed. And I'm looking forward to seeing some of these players come through, because they look like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we are nothing if not fans of fun rugby. But also, just to give it wouldn't be fair if we didn't give a little shout out for some of the good performances in the England shirt. I thought Josh Bellamy had a really good game at fullback.
I think one of his strongest games I've seen him play. And I think he's a good player, Josh Bellamy. But
I didn't think he had that side of game in him, if I was honest, because he's always been a 10 in my brain. But that was a good performance.
I thought he was really good. I thought Ben Redshaw hit some really good lines.
Yeah. Our man Noah Kalori came on as well for a couple of good aerial battles. Although
Noah Kalori, really good to see him in there. He's got a few years before he's fully developed, and I thought.
He's an 18-year-old in the under-20s, so he's got a couple of years left still in that level.
Yeah. McEachran showing some nice hands to put Johnny Wyman in, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Kane James, again, is showing that he's developing into a really good player. I think he's going to be one of those that belies his size in the back row, really punches above his own weight.
Yeah.
Billy Seller is increasingly exciting. I'm really excited to see where he goes. And Kepa Tupolotto, always exciting.
Yeah.
I suspect they probably did suffer for not having someone like Timmins in the back row. Just someone really hard-nosed and direct and just tough. Not that these guys weren't tough, but Timmins just brings a slightly different dimension there, and they'll probably rue that. They probably make the argument that they would have been better off starting Kapoku.
Yeah, it was an interesting one when I saw that team sheet.
I didn't hate it as a selection, and actually, there's no slight on anyone who was selected because I think they were already good. But I would say if they'd really wanted to get the upper hand, you probably needed to pick Kapoku as well, particularly with the loss of Timmins. But all told, I think England can massively hold their heads up high, and all right, they'll probably end up with a bronze medal at this point. But if they go on, but actually, what in terms of a development pathway, it's that they're proving that they are still developing players that can mix with the best, because that South African team is right up there.
Yeah.
And some of the boys there, I think, have proven that they're ready for the step up and ready to be looked at as serious men's players. And I think Josh Bellamy's one who, in that game in particular, has shown that he is a name to look out for, certainly in the Premiership.
Yeah, no, I think there's a few names from that team who I think their parent clubs, they'll be looking at thinking they're ready for a bit more senior rugby, I think.
I really want to see Sodica.
I pray Saracens start getting him some game time, because I think him with a bit of Premiership experience, the size he has, because he is gigantic.
He is ginormous.
I'd love to see it. And again, as a Northampton Saints fan, very difficult to admit. But, we have to accept these things sometimes. Sometimes it's for the greater good, championing those players at other clubs, because, frankly, I love seeing these guys blossom and go on to do great things. And there is still there's a 2% chance that England can still get to the final if certain results go certain ways. I don't see it happening.
No, but it's. I think what you say is it's obviously what you want to do is win this tournament. That's the obvious thing to say. But actually, these tournaments are about developing these players into men, and that game in and of itself would have had the value of doing that.
The amount they would have learnt from that game alone would have been worth a Six Nations on its own, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Should we talk a little bit about some of the other results in the tournament?
Yes, we probably don't have time to go through all of them, but I can think of a few notable ones that may be worth picking out.
Italy beating Ireland, and I know Italy at that age grade level have had a bit of an edge over a few teams in recent years, but really good result for them. Really, really pleasing for them. Georgia giving New Zealand a little bit of a fright, and given that New Zealand had a bit of a fright against Italy last week, and have had a bit of a fright against Georgia again. Question marks over that New Zealand side now. Serious questions.
Well, as you said before, having watched some of the other kind of earmarked top teams, I think the void between England and South Africa and the rest is pretty large at this moment. Because you talk the Wales-France game, Wales were really giving France a scare as well.
But the biggest scare of them all, Argentina-Spain.
Yeah.
I mean, and Spain, so I'm just looking at it here, Spain were in the lead in that game for 62 of those minutes.
The thing is, because obviously I've done a fair bit of research before that tournament. There's a huge number in that Spanish team that are coming through French academy teams.
There are a lot of players, but they had 18 come through with Spanish domestic clubs as well.
Absolutely. The core is still Spanish domestic clubs, but I think my point is this is a generation of Spanish rugby that is going to get better and better and better.
Oh no, 100%. I'm really, really here for it because I think between what Spanish rugby and Portuguese rugby are doing, there's some really exciting stuff happening in that end of Europe. With Italy as well, obviously on the up. You know, if you can start to see some of the other maybe dormant European nations come back, the likes of Romania, you know, you suddenly start thinking you've got a really strong European competition. So don't want to get too ahead of things, but it's so exciting to see these teams compete because it's a good Argentina side.
Yeah.
No, I mean, commiserations to England on this one because it was a tough game, but South Africa was so good. I'm really pleased for them because that's an exciting team. And if I was South African, I'd be so excited.
You cannot take anything away from that South African side off that performance. It was very, very impressive.
No, absolutely. And England have got a game against Australia to target, and they'll fancy their chance of getting a good score there and giving themselves as much opportunity as possible.
Absolutely.
I think this is why we love under-20s rugby, right? Because it's
you
so
see
unpredictable.
things. Yeah, it's unpredictable, and you see players that you've not heard of doing wonderful things. It is the start of players making a name for themselves, and I think it's great. Like the number of players that have gone on from this competition to go and get full caps, I think it's a great system.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Should we touch on any of the other internationals over that bumper weekend of rugby?
Well, let's talk through a few things.
Should we start Japan-Wales?
Did you watch this game? Because I did.
I watched the most of the second half. Basically, as and when Japan started turning things around.
In a moment of hungover self-flagellation, I watched this entire game. Dreadful. A dreadful game. And Wales, obviously, I think went in 19-7 at half-time.
Yeah.
Up and just fell away in the heat in Japan in the second half, and very much what Eddie Jones wanted them to do because he insisted on the game kicking off at 2 p.m.
Yeah.
Which, very Eddie Jones move. Will endear him still further to the Welsh Rugby Republic, I'm sure. This was a poor game. Really.
Yeah. Was not quite the spectacle. But I think the ramifications of these results, especially if Wales go and lose again, Wales have dropped below Japan in the world rankings.
It's pot 3, I think, now. Now pot 4, in fact.
Yeah, they've dropped down a pot when it comes to World Cup group stage rank. They could get drawn in some real nasty groups now, and they've not got a leg to stand on.
No. And what's doubly unfortunate, or say unfortunate, galling maybe, is that Japan side had a lot of debutants in that team, like something like 10 debutants.
Yeah, it wasn't their main team either. It wasn't Wales' main team, obviously, but
because they're all the players with the Lions, obviously.
95% of their player talent pool is with the Lions.
Yeah. Oh dear. I'm going to apologise to my friend Ollie Drake, who will hear this at some point and send me a nasty text.
Sorry, Drakey.
Yeah. I look really poor. I'm really worrying signs of Wales that they can't put games like that away. It's now looking almost like terminal decline.
Your under-20s looked good for 40 minutes.
The under-20s are showing some signs of life. But it's bleak.
Yeah.
Outside of that, the French C team nearly overturning New Zealand's A team.
I was so close to just putting something out saying, imagine complaining about a team not sending their strongest team and then going and losing to them. I was just, please let that happen.
They nearly did. Yeah, really sluggish. I mean, they're making lots of calls about the referee and referee decisions. In no way typical of Kiwis in the slightest. But the French really put it up them, and they've got their player depth is still terrifying.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to the second test there. I'm wondering if New Zealand step it up a notch, or if the French for another week together might pull something out of the bag.
I think they'll be buoyed by how close that was. It's definitely very interesting. Yeah, the French depth does scare me, and if you were to list the players they didn't have available, scary the
Yeah.
players they don't have.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bode well for Six Nations going forward. But we'll worry about that next year.
We beat Argentina.
Yeah, we beat Argentina. We beat them well, and Argentina beat the Lions, and Lions are going to beat Australia, and Australia beating New Zealand at some point in history, right?
I assume as much.
So by that logic, England are the best team in the world.
100%.
So
Italy winning the second half against South Africa.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah, I didn't see much of this game, but by all accounts, giving a really strong showing and showing up the South Africans in this occasion.
Yes.
I think there's some pretty dour reports from South Africans on their team's performance.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying people just aren't fit for the shirt because they just take it for granted. And Rassie Erasmus has wielded the cutting axe for the second test, which is always an interesting call.
Yeah, and it's not strong Italy. Well, I'd say not strong. It's not strongest Italy side.
No.
It's a mixed Italy side. So yeah, and did you see the maul they ran? They mauled it over for about 15 meters or something against South Africa.
I mean, that's that. I think that in itself would have raised the alarm bells in most South African households more so than anything else.
I believe the South Africans getting mauled over from that distance is one of the harbingers of the apocalypse. I've not read my Nostradamus recently, but from memory, an Italian pack running over the South African pack is signs of the end of days.
Yeah, so enjoy the time while we have it, Rory.
Yeah, as long as I can watch the second test against Argentina, I'm all right.
Oh, as long as it can wait to the end of the Lions tour. It's fine.
Yeah, and then biggest result of the weekend: Scotland winning narrowly against the Maro All Blacks. So well done, Scotland.
Yes, I've enjoyed watching a lot of Scottish fans trying to claim this is a huge victory against New Zealand.
Massive it was. I'm just looking at the Maro All Blacks side now, and there's a lot of big names there. That one's got at least 12 letters in it. No, I think so.
Well, and when they go back to their day jobs, their colleagues in the cubicle next to them are going to be really, really proud of them.
Oh yeah, the other lads down the building site are going to be
super impressed.
Really giving to them.
They might even make them cups of tea. We'll never know.
Yeah.
But we joke. Obviously,
I mean, it is genuinely a good result for Scotland because they've obviously got a lot of players with the Lions.
Yeah,
and actually,
good test of their depth.
And it's an interesting test series they've got against the Maro All Blacks, Fiji, Samoa, I think it is.
Yeah.
That is an interesting. And actually, it's good that someone's doing that test tour.
Well, we've said before, we want some tier 1 nations to go and visit these places and do that. And
they're doing it, so fair play to them.
Yeah, we joke, but fair play.
We joke with love.
Yeah. Rory, is there anything in DPRFR land for this week?
There was a bit of a dichotomy this week, David.
Oh, I hate these weeks.
I didn't know who to honour. There was a good argument for a raging gaucho bull in Argentina to be honoured for for a magnificent break. Gajo absolutely flattening Freddie Stewart.
Yeah.
On a rampage.
Yeah.
And I was going to do some Matador and some gaucho references to it.
Yeah.
Free range gaucho bull I actually had down his hair. But this today I was just going through some of the highlights and some things happened, and something I hadn't picked up on Saturday that I should have done, and I'm remiss for not noting it at the time. I think it's Tom Lambert played loosehead for the Tars on Saturday.
Okay, yeah.
Did you see his tackle in the corner against Van der Fleer?
No, I missed that.
Him.
That was him. That was the loose head.
That was the loose head. Everyone missed that it was the loose head because he's got the body of a back rower. That
escaped me.
That was an act of DPRF espionage and subterfuge. I loved when I saw it back. Taniela Tupou's kick aside, easily the moment of the match for a front rower. Chasing Van der Fleer back into the corner and tackling him out, saving a try, looking like prime 6.
Yeah, I need to go watch this now because I just can't believe it. So
the DPR have men everywhere.
We do. Our coverage is worldwide, Rory.
We have got sleeper cells everywhere.
We've got sleeper cells in every corner of every pitch.
You'll never see us come in. You'll see some of us come in because we're big, but you won't see all of us because we've got guys like Tom Lambert that you can't escape.
You can't escape him. Not even Josh van der Fleer, where it literally says he can fly in his name. Wow.
Massive.
Well done, Tom Lambert. Very, very proud of a prop capable of confusing me like that. I had that escaped me. I just assumed that would have been their blindside flanker just doing what blindside flankers do. I am impressed. I am bemused. And on that note, Rory, do you have any final thoughts for the listener before we close the final podcast with me having a gallbladder?
Farewell to your gallbladder.
Au revoir, bladder de ghoul. And this has been Rucks, Mauls and Oval Balls with episode 28. We've enjoyed having you listen. We hope you've enjoyed listening. We will be back next week with more mundane banter and more rugby chatter. So yeah, catch you then.
Bye.